Hello and welcome to another Radio for a World That Works podcast, this time Communication for a World That Works and Nonviolent Communication Revisited. It's over 10 years since I first came across nonviolent communication, or NVC, thanks to my friend and guide, Reverend Hilary Woollett. It's the gift that keeps on giving from originator and master communicator Marshall Rosenberg, who formulated the first principles of NVC in 1960s America. For OurNet, where my role sits largely within communication, I'm revisiting this profound methodology in the realms of communication for a world that works, i.e. a spotlight on a way of connecting with others and ourselves that can offer more of what I believe our hearts desire. OurNet is essentially an online community communication concept, and whilst creating a new context where communities can connect more richly, our aim is not to be prescriptive or dogmatic. So I share this look at NVC with you not necessarily as an endorsement or an expectation, although I do value it greatly, but as a possibility and a point of reference in a world where communication technology is increasingly sophisticated, yet the transmission and reception still often resorts to level primitive. It would appear we humans are being blessed with a next-level Gutenberg moment, and with it an absolute deluge of potentially liberating information and awareness. But we seem to be struggling to move beyond our hardwired reactions of polarity, conflict and war, even if our new weapon of choice is the keyboard. Hence the review of NVC. Here is a way of lifting our relationships from the battlefield and into a more idealistic and experimental laboratory, ultimately into respect, love and compassion. So in Oxford, UK, on a hot spring day in 2008, I attended my first NVC workshop with renowned trainer and exponent Bridget Belgrave. In her ennobling environment, a sign greeted us on entry that asked, "Would you like to be honest without insulting people? Would you like to be heard to your complete satisfaction? Would you like to handle conflict with confidence? Would you like to transform anger into positive communication? Never hear blame or criticism again? Inspire willing cooperation? Would you like to deepen good relationships? Would you like to enjoy people?" Who wouldn't want any or all of those blessings in their lives? So what follows is my conversation with Bridget after the workshop about nonviolent communication, where I begin by attempting to put some NVC principles into practice. Later in the interview, I asked Bridget a big question. Is there a massive mismatch between what people are feeling and needing and what our society gives them? And I think that question is still relevant today, 10 years later. For that matter, are your needs being met by the common agreements of how our world operates in that curious and increasingly ill-fitting place known as normality? If they're not, if you feel like the proverbial square peg, you may wish to keep listening. Hi there, Bridget. Thank you for a lovely day.
Hi, thanks for coming all this way from Exeter.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's been a wonderful day. And if I may, I'll try and put the model that we were working with into practice to couch my question, if you like.
Sure, that's fine.
Right, so it looks to me like NVC, and perhaps we could go into an entry-level description of what NVC is in a moment, but I've noticed today that we're working with, I think somebody called them the 4 ingredients.
Yes. Right.
We've got observation, feeling, need and request as a new way of communicating with people. And since I've known about NVC, I've been a bit uncomfortable, or maybe haven't made a very good job of communicating what NVC is. So I'm going to attempt to use the model now.
Okay,
right. So my observation is that we've been here today in Oxford, in a community hall with about 40 people, and we've been through the basic model and looked at the NVC dance floor. My feeling is I'm very excited, a little bit tired. It's been a very intense and busy day, but I'm more excited about NVC than I've ever been, and it's been great to be here. My need, I think, and perhaps this kind of combines with my request of you, is how to be able to enroll people in NVC or talk to people about NVC without them getting upset, challenged. And this is that's sort of a disclosure of mine, if you like, in my efforts to speak to other people about it. It's gone horribly wrong.
Aha. It sounds like right now you're inspired, and it makes you kind of, again, you want to find ways to spread the word, to tell people about it. And remembering some things that you've done before, a little nervous about that, or cautious,
yes,
looking for some advice. Is that right?
It is, and I've had some discomfort around the name. When I begin to tell people about nonviolent communication, they all, I don't know, it may be the way I put it, but they say, but I'm not violent in my communication. It does tend to rub people up the wrong way, that the inference is that, people get a bit defensive when you say, I'm interested in this new thing, you might be interested in it, it's nonviolent communication, and immediately people think, well, I'm not violent, I don't hit people when I'm talking to them.
Well, what I say to people at the supermarket checkout or at a party or something is, I work with a way of communicating that helps people not judge and blame each other. And they nearly always say, we need more of that around here.
That's where I've been going wrong.
Yeah, so I am
Could you say that again?
Yes, it's finding a way to communicate where you're not judging and blaming each other.
Right.
So in other words, saying something that people are already aware of that's in their life. It's not like huge, but they go, oh yeah, I recognize that. And and if they then get more interested and we have a conversation, at some point they might say, what's this work called, or where's it based on?
Yes.
And so I would introduce the title Nonviolent Communication after they're interested, because, like you, I'm concerned that people discover what this work really does, and sometimes the title kind of covers over for them the potential of this work for them as individuals, as peace-loving, creative people who care about the planet. They might not immediately associate themselves with needing work that's called nonviolent communication.
So I guess another way of looking at this would be to use the model again and look at communicating it in a way that meets people's needs. And the way you did it absolutely does that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you mentioned before that it's sometimes referred to as compassionate communication or even effective communication.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because one discovers, I did learn through this, it made me a lot more conscious of what I was doing in my own communication that was not effective, and it gave me some choices that I didn't have before.
Right.
How to be more effective. I was well aware some things weren't effective, like losing my temper with my son. Wasn't effective. I was unhappy about it. And even with a lot of personal development work, I found that hard to change. But here, I was given something else to do instead, so my energy could go in a direction that would be constructive. And I was really struck what a difference that made.
I get a great sense of that as well, and that's why I think I'm so excited and inspired about it, is that you have a new option.
Yes.
And the word that was used today is enriching, isn't it? That this can actually, there's no need to feel bad or wrong for not practicing this right. But when it does go well, it enriches things for all concerned. Yeah. And that's a very sort of compelling and engaging, way of looking at it.
And another thing I like is the new option is learnable and it is doable. It's like within range.
Yeah.
Because if we use, anger, temper, for example, because I mentioned that already, I used to read in books, just drop your anger. And I never really discovered how to do that, to be honest.
In the way that people say, just relax.
Yeah. So
Easier
but here,
said than done.
It says, focus your attention this way. Focus on what happened. Focus on how you're feeling right now. Focus on your present need, what's really important in this situation, and the other person's present need. And then work out a strategy that will go towards meeting that need, and then when you make the request, you communicate about that strategy, a possible strategy that might meet that need. And it sounds really simple to put it like that, but in a moment of heat, the map is simple enough to use, and that's part of the power.
Yeah, definitely. And another thing you said today was it's a bit like learning a foreign language.
Yes.
And there's the immediate benefit, isn't there, of knowing a few words and phrases that can really, if you're abroad, if people know you're making an effort to speak their language, it can be wonderful, can't it, that you've tried to order some beers or a bed for the night and they're delighted that you've bothered to learn their language.
Yes.
But at the other end, there's the benefit of becoming really fluent in that language and really immersing yourself in the culture. And it just seems to me that with NVC, you can get some of those quick benefits by just having a quick think about how you communicate. And then you can go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into it. And I mean, can you say something about the work that's going on around the world to do with how deep this work's going?
Yeah, I'm so moved, really, when I think of what has happened even in the last 11, 12 years that I've been involved in nonviolent communication. A couple of people here today were asking me about cross-cultural communication, and there was one woman here from Yugoslavia, so I was remembering my friend who is an NVC trainer living in Belgrade, and just before NATO started bombing in Kosovo, she was going down to the capital there, Pristina, and mediating between Serbs and Albanians. And she wrote me emails about this, how in the first hour they would literally run out of the room shouting at each other, calling each other names. And within 2 hours, they'd be talking to each other. And by the end of the day, they'd be like in tears and offering to help rebuild each other's houses. And she did a lot of mediation in those extremely painful contexts in Bosnia and Croatia and Serbia and Kosovo. That was quite, more in the news some years ago, but the level of pain in those places continues.
Yeah.
And unless people work at that level, there's really no other solution in the long term.
It really baffles me that it is effectively very simple, isn't it? That the whole business of understanding people's basic needs and then relating to them from that place.
It sounds simple. It's very difficult to do.
But politically, socially, culturally, we seem to be moving away from that understanding, or we're forgetting about it. We've got an amnesia about it, it seems, that, we're being told what our needs are by the media, for example. And it just seems to me that there seems to be a growing rebellion among younger people, that how they're understood or misunderstood, it doesn't fit with them. And they are, as you say, did you say acting out or acting up as a result of not being understood?
Right.
I mean, would you agree with that? Do you think that there is this massive mismatch between what people are actually feeling and needing and what our society gives them?
That's such a big question.
It is a bit,
I'll just say yes right now. I'll say yes.
Okay.
I'll say yes based on the huge percentage of people who are on antidepressants.
Yeah, right.
For example.
Yeah.
I'll say yes based on some young, individual people I know who've grown up through the school system. Of course there are people in these structures whose needs are met, and of course there are people who are doing their best to provide need-meeting environments, teachers, head teachers, education specialists, whatever, since we're talking about education system again now for a moment. I think there is a paradigm shift, though, that when people really get it, that when someone's behaving in a way you don't like, it's because they're troubled by a need of theirs they're finding hard to meet at that moment, either because of your presence making it harder for them, or their structure they're having to exist in, like a child in a school system, or somebody in a workplace. If it's hard for someone to meet their needs, they're very likely to behave in a way that you don't like.
Yeah.
And we tend to then label people as something wrong with them, which takes us further away from empathy.
Yes.
And takes that person probably further into their behaviour that's uncomfortable for us. So I do see that happening a lot and feel very sad about it. At the same time, because of the work I do, I'm in touch with so many people who are working in the other direction that I don't really have a clear vision of which is growing faster.
Yeah.
But I am aware all over the world there are people really drawn to this sense of, this makes a lot of sense to focus on.
Yeah.
That someone is never wrong, that they're always doing their best to meet a need. We might not like their action, we might not like their strategy to meet their needs, but if we can understand their needs, then we've got some room to influence what strategies they choose, and also to respect and support them about finding a way to meet the need that works for others in their environment.
Yeah, I'm very hopeful about that. I think there's actually like an expansive or expanding awareness going on that hopefully will have some room for that. And evidence for me, if you like, is connected with the name. Although I found it a bit clumsy, and I've explained before about, when I've talked to people about nonviolent communication, clearly the roots are in the work of Gandhi and Martin Luther King. And it seems that, their interest in their message hasn't gone away. And on a grassroots level, people in growing numbers are inspired by non-violence or looking at non-destructive ways to live together and to live according to their dreams, visions and passions. And
I like focusing on the word ahimsa that Gandhi used, because it's a Sanskrit word, so it's from his culture, and thinking of non-violence as a positive quality that we can develop within ourselves that influences what happens around us to go more towards safety, growth, creativity, satisfaction, that through that intention and attitude of ahimsa or non-violence, that we can cultivate within ourselves. And non-violent communication that is developed by a man called Marshall Rosenberg in the United States about 40 years ago initially, when he began to put the model together, is like a practical means of developing that quality. And for me, I love the way that people have come to my workshops or invited me and other trainers in nonviolent communication into their settings from, for example, from all the different religions. So I've done workshops for Christian sisters who are nuns, for Buddhist monks, for people who are not interested in being part of any religion at all. So there's something very universal about this information, and very attractive to people once they understand the possibility of coming to something that's more satisfying than their present way of communicating and more effective.
Thank you for that. By the way, we're not afraid to ask the big questions, clearly.
Yes. It was a big question.
It was, wasn't it? But maybe one thing to say is if people want to find out more about your work, where could they look? Is there a website people can visit?
Thank you. Yes, there's a website which is www.nvcdancefloors.com.
Okay, so we've got
nvcdancefloors.com.
all the W's, nvcdancefloors.com.
That's right.
Great, okay.
And there was one other thing I'd like to say before we finish, because we started with a little bit of specifics about nonviolent communication, and I'd just like to come back to that.
Sure.
Because sometimes when people refer to these 4 ingredients that you referred to at the beginning, observations, meaning what we see and hear, actually we mean by observations, our feelings in relation to that, our needs met or unmet, and our requests, which are to do with the strategies to meet them. That sounds a little simplistic, and it is simple, but it's subtle because there's other layers in nonviolent communication which we haven't emphasized so much in this interview, which make a big difference, so that you end up with quite a number of options, it's not like an ABCD thing. There's movement, there's flow, there's choices all the time in where we focus our attention, whether I'm expressing to you or listening to you or connecting with myself internally, for example. Those are 3 choices. And so you put those 3 together with those 4 ingredients, and now you're up to 12 steps immediately.
Yes.
And there's a little more to it even than that, but, we won't reveal everything because, of course, it's fun for people to go and look that up. And there's this quality of being conscious of our intention. And what people see once they see someone who's very fluent in nonviolent communication in action is that it's actually far more subtle than they imagined at first. And there is a flow and a naturalness that's possible that can combine with this consciousness in communication once you kind of get it. Like learning anything, like driving.
Like the language again, I guess.
Like language, like driving. It feels so awkward to start with. And then after a while you do it without hardly thinking, and it becomes a more natural seeming process.
Yes.
I love it that nonviolent communication never seems to end for me in terms of revealing new awareness and depth and clarity and possibilities in my communication. And I like things like that, things that are simple, learnable, and yet have depth. You can hear the same thing 40 times and it still sounds fresh and new, and you think, why did I never hear that before?
Yes.
That kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, okay, thank you very much indeed.
Okay. My pleasure.
I regard myself as a soldier, though a soldier of peace. I know the value of discipline and truth. I must ask you to believe me when I say that I have never made a statement of this description, that the masses of India, if it became necessary, would resort to violence.
You can find out more about Bridget at www.nvcdancefloors.com and find nonviolent_communication on Wikipedia. I'll finish with something my aforementioned friend Hilary said when I interviewed her about nonviolent communication. We have a tremendous power in our world to think before we speak, she said, and to know that there is another way of doing it, she added. So stay tuned for more Other Ways here on Radio for a World That Works.